Hello again, this is Morten from Inkish. We are still here with Intergraf Print Matters in Budapest, and this time I have the pleasure of talking to Mark Boyt from Keypoint Intelligence. Hey Mark.
Hi, nice to see you.
Nice to see you. You are real, you're not a robot, right?
That's very true.
Okay. See, it seems like every time we go to these conferences and listen about AI and robots, better check, right?
Yeah, well, you never know. Sometime in the future, that may be true.
Do you think it will be like that? I mean, because in your presentation here, you spoke about all the advantages and also the funny history about robots, right?
Yep.
And we're talking about, for example, that one of the challenges with industrial robots is the grippers.
Yes.
But if you have a humanoid, you have a hand on it, basically, right?
Yeah.
So do you think that there will be like a fast forward to having humanoids instead of having industrial robots in printing companies?
Well, I guess at the end, the grippers on a humanoid are similar grippers you put on a robotic arm. So the reality is fix the gripper and it will affect both robotics, the arms and the humanoid. The issue about, I guess, humans is, we're back to this point, we're a limited resource and the working population is shrinking. So that pressure on the printers to find an alternative way of keeping their production going is really, really important. And you're right, but even if you think about humans, carrying B2 sheets is not normal. It's not the best use of us
either.
And not
pleasant either.
And not
right?
pleasant either.
Yeah.
So the reality is, I think what robotic companies are going to do is come up with far better ways of carrying those meters. It's probably more under support rather than arms, etc. And that's the beauty of robotics is there's a whole load of components which you can mix and match to find that right solution for that specific problem.
So you also mentioned that labor cost versus the capex on a robot, of course, plays a role in the adaptation of it, right? One of the things that I have been worried about for many years is basically that every time there is a productivity gain in a printing company, there is a tendency that a majority of the gain is given to the customers.
Right.
And I was just wondering, do you think this will help printing companies becoming more profitable, or do you think the same methodology will happen when you get into the next level?
That's a really interesting question. You're back to, again, I guess what the root cause of the problem is, what they're trying to address. And at the moment, it's certainly their rising costs and the implications of that they're dealing with. And some of it does mean, yes, they're having to put their prices up, accept lower volumes, etc. So is there a way this might address that? I think that's an interesting possibility.
I'm asking also because your colleague, Herman from the US, I met him online yesterday, is basically addressing the digital print side of it, right?
Yes.
And of course, robots has a huge existence and future in digital print because it's small volumes, it needs to be handled frequently, basically, right? And I was just thinking because I don't think of any manufacturer today that believe that they make enough money on print, and for the OEM and for the PSPs as well. And I'm just wondering, is all this automation is just a race to the bottom? And I was just thinking maybe Keypoint Intelligence had actually been looking into those kind of things.
I haven't personally, but I think that's a really interesting point for us to look at. We're back to the benefits of what a robot will do once it's in, and it's interesting. There's been some conversations about that. Do people do all of those calculations and work it out exactly? Or are people now starting to invest in robots and then they're discovering alongside that, alongside the labor benefits, they're then discovering other huge benefits that come along. I think that's probably the most likely thing first. And you're right. My logic, if I was a printer, would be, how do I take that as well as profit, keep the business going? Yeah,
because that would be from a business perspective the logical thing. But the data we have seen from Bowers, the thing that I also think that Intergraf at some point has shown, there is so many very small companies in the industry that are maybe struggling a little bit because the size of the company, the investment in new technology. And if they enter into a market where the big ones can even be very competitive on pricing and be profitable, it can squeeze a lot of printers to actually lower the margins. Right?
Yeah, and that's one of the interesting points, I guess, about robotics, because we think about, as you said, the capex, this big ticket price for it. But one of the things we're going to see is robots as a service come through. So that's when you're going to shift now from capex to opex. And then now you're back to a small business. Can they now invest? Well, if the idea is that they've lost someone, let's say one out of their workforce, out of 4, that's 25%. Bring a robot in as a service. it's going to be a lot easier for them. They're going to benefit from robots just like a bigger companies.
Just a few weeks ago, Chica and I were filming a German printing company. And I refer to that because you had that people first ask their print supplier, and then they go to a robotic supplier. I think was it 19 robots? Yeah. So they had I think they had 29 Canon presses. Right. Most of them toner based, and then they had a few inkjet as well. Yep. But instead of paying, let's say, a premium of buying it from the print OEMs, they went directly to the print manufacturer and started to both do the programming and the grippers themselves. Right. Is that a tendency that you also see, or is that like a rare example?
I've heard of a few others that have done it, and I guess then it comes down to the capability of that printer in terms of doing it. The reality is you can buy robots cheaper, especially from China. So if you have that...
Denmark even, with universal robots,
right? That's true. So if you have that capability, it is one way of doing it. My point about cost, I guess, is that if it's a bespoke solution, then you are investing in the software as well as the robot. What I'm anticipating is a lot of the requirements for robots are going to be consistent. Unloading and loading, there's a little bit of variability between devices, but it should be consistent. Therefore, the productization of that should be more logical, and therefore the cost will come down.
But when we talk to companies like Yaskawa and MBO, it seems that it's taken a long time for the robot companies to even consider doing bespoke solutions, right? So that is only when like a company like MBO, Heidelberg, Koenig & Bauer, like the big ones, when they HP, when they invest in these, that they start to actually take a part of that risk in their development, right?
Well, yeah. So again, the robotic go-to-market is there's the big companies, but then they have the system integrators. Yeah. So I was thinking about the system integrator is the one that's doing that bespoke work.
Yeah, yeah. And but it seems like the MBOs and the Heidelbergs and the HP seem to be the integrators in that.
In that model, yes, exactly. Yeah. And then the interesting thing is actually their ability to then go and install and do all those things. Yeah. So does the system integrator still have a role to play in this whole space? It's going to be very interesting to see how it evolves.
So presentation here. I think it went pretty well, right?
I think so. I mean, the point was to, I guess, shake things up a bit, get people thinking a little bit differently. Clearly, the research indicates a lot of people are aware and are ready to buy, but it still feels as if there's still this waiting bit. That point about, I'll still wait to see whether my competitors or my fellow printers move first is still that little bit of concern. And that point about actually, the amount of robots that are actually available from the vendors today is not huge either. So there's those elements that need to change to really drive this. But yeah, I think there was a reaction. It seemed positive, which is good.
Was it also for you and Keypoint Intelligence to show the flag with new ownership and maybe a renewed strength in the research?
Well, funny enough, this actually goes back to before then. But I think that there's being part of a bigger company, it helps in terms of how we go to market. But robotics specifically, let's say, was something we saw before and something we see potentially going on for many years to come. So it's going to be an interesting new opportunity for us, certainly.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Pleasure.
As well.